Two men in tactical gear showed up at a veteran's front door and told him he had 48 hours to get out of the house he owned. The paperwork was fake. The threat was real. What they didn't know was that his calendar was marked for a very specific reunion, a reunion of 6 of the most dangerous men you'd never want to meet. Have you ever been pushed around, made to feel small and powerless by someone who thought they could get away with it? That feeling in the pit of your stomach, the heat in your chest. That's what this story is about. But it's also about the ice-cold, deeply satisfying taste of justice. If you know that feeling, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a story about a scam that backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. Calvin Dunmore was a man who valued peace. He'd earned it. After 2 decades as a Navy SEAL, the quiet hum of his suburban neighborhood wasn't boring. It was a symphony. It was the sound of normalcy, of safety. This house, a modest but well-kept ranch style, wasn't just a building. It was his anchor. Every mortgage payment was a battle won against the chaos of his past. He'd sanded the floors himself, planted the rose bushes out front. This was his kingdom. That afternoon, he was in the garage, oiling the hinges on an old toolbox, the familiar metallic scent calming him. He was expecting company. Not just any company. The kind of brothers you only make in the crucible of conflict. His team was coming for their annual reunion, a tradition built on barbecue, bad jokes, and the unspoken bond of men who had literally held each other as lives in their hands. The knock on the front door wasn't the friendly tap of a neighbor borrowing sugar. It was a series of hard, percussive thumps. Bang, bang, bang! It was the sound of authority, and it didn't belong here. A cold trickle of instinct, long dormant in civilian life, traced a path down Calvin's spine. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked to the door. Through the peephole, the world was distorted into a fisheye view. 2 men, broad-shouldered, grim-faced, and they were wearing tactical vests over civilian clothes, not police, something else. His heart, a steady drum for years, gave a single hard thump against his ribs. He opened the door. The sunlight hit the taller one's vest, reflecting a cheap plastic badge that read HOA enforcement. The words felt wrong. HOAs send nasty letters. They don't send men who look like they're about to clear a room. Calvin Dunmore? The taller one said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation. His voice was flat, devoid of empathy. That's me, Calvin said, his own voice quieter than he intended. He could feel his posture shifting, his feet settling unconsciously into a more stable stance. Old habits. The man thrust a clipboard toward him. The paperwork on it was a joke, a poorly formatted Word document with a blurry copied logo at the top. We're here to execute an emergency eviction order. The HOA has exercised its right of repossession due to multiple severe bylaw violations. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. The words hit Calvin like physical blows. Vacate. Repossession. This was his house. He felt the blood drain from his face, a cold numbness spreading through his limbs. This had to be a mistake, a terrible bureaucratic nightmare. There has to be a mistake, he said, his voice tighter now. I don't have any violations. I own this house, free and clear. The second man, shorter but thicker, took a half step forward, a subtle move designed to intimidate, to invade personal space. The paperwork doesn't lie, pal. You're in violation of Covenant 12B, unauthorized structural modifications, and Covenant 7D, creating a persistent nuisance. A nuisance? What nuisance? The flagpole, sir, the tall one said, pointing a finger toward the simple stainless steel pole in Calvin's front yard, from which an American flag fluttered gently in the breeze. Unauthorized permanent structure. You were notified. Calvin had received no such notice. He'd installed that pole the day he moved in. For 5 years, it had flown the flag without issue. This was insane. He felt a hot flush of anger rise to replace the cold shock. This wasn't a mistake. This was a shakedown, a scam. These men were predators, and they thought they'd found easy prey. A single man living alone. The shorter man's eyes scanned Calvin's property, his gaze calculating, greedy. Look, we don't make the rules. We just enforce them. You can make this easy on yourself, or you can make it hard. But in 48 hours, we will be back with a locksmith and county sheriff's deputies to remove you. One way or another. The threat hung in the air, ugly and final. They were counting on the implied violence of their presence, on the confusing legalese, on the fear that a normal person would feel. They wanted him scared. They wanted him to panic, to maybe even offer them money to make it all go away. For a terrifying moment, Calvin felt that exact powerlessness. The world shrinking to the space between him and these two imposters. His heart was a frantic bird trapped in the cage of his ribs. This was everything he'd left the teams to escape. Bullies with a veneer of authority, leveraging fear to get what they wanted. But then, a sound. Faint at first. The low rumble of a diesel engine, growing louder. Recognition dawned, and with it, a glacial calm settled over him. The fear didn't vanish. It was simply repurposed, forged into something else, something sharp. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched Calvin's lips. It didn't reach his eyes. The two men in vests shifted, confused by the change in his demeanor. "Something funny?" the tall one snapped. Calvin's voice was now low, steady, and devoid of all emotion. It was the voice he used before a storm. "Your timing," he said, his eyes looking over their shoulders down the street. "It's truly impeccable." The roar of the diesel engine grew deafening, then cut off abruptly. Doors opened, heavy doors. 6 men stepped out of a massive black extended cab truck. They weren't wearing tactical vests. They were wearing well-worn jeans, boots, and t-shirts, stretched tight across shoulders that seemed almost too broad for the human frame. They moved with a relaxed, predatory grace that was more terrifying than any aggressive posturing. They didn't need to pretend to be tough. The 2 HOA guys turned, their confidence evaporating as they took in the sight. These 6 new arrivals weren't just big, they had a look in their eyes, a stillness, a quiet assessment that missed nothing. The leader of the group, a man with a graying flat top and a grip that could crush coal into diamond, cracked his neck. He looked at the 2 imposters. He looked at the fake badges. He looked at his friend Calvin's face, which had transformed from panicked homeowner to something else entirely. "Cal," the man with the flat top said, his voice a gravelly rumble, "we bringing the party out front this year?" The 2 imposters tried to regain control. "This is a private HOA matter," the tall one stammered, puffing out his chest, the plastic badge looking more ridiculous than ever. "You need to move along." The 6 friends didn't move. They simply fanned out. Not aggressively, not yet. It was a subtle repositioning, a tactical envelopment executed with unconscious precision. They formed a loose semicircle, cutting off any easy escape route down the driveway. The neighborhood, which had been quietly watching from behind curtains, now had people openly on porches, phones held up, recording. Calvin finally spoke, his voice clear and loud enough for the whole street to hear. "These gentlemen were just informing me that my American flag is a persistent nuisance," he said, his gaze locked on the 2 imposters, "and that I have 48 hours to get out of my own home. They're with the HOA enforcement. Isn't that right?" The man with the flat top took a single step forward. He didn't say a word. He just reached out, took the clipboard from the tall man's limp hand, and glanced at the paperwork. He snorted, a sound of pure derision. "HOA enforcement," he read aloud, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's cute." He let the clipboard clatter to the pavement. "You know what my friend Calvin here did for 20 years? He enforced things, with real consequences." The shorter imposter, sensing the tide had turned catastrophically, made a mistake. He reached for his phone, maybe to call for help, maybe to pretend to call the police. In a movement almost too fast to follow, one of the other SEALs, a man with hands like slabs of granite, gently placed his own hand over the phone. "I wouldn't," he said, his voice quiet, almost friendly. But his eyes were not. "Let's all just have a conversation." The imposter froze. The phone was gently taken from his hand. Panic finally truly set into their eyes. The facade was gone. These weren't tough guys executing a plan. They were cornered rats. The audience was growing. Phones were recording everything. Their entire scam was unraveling on a public stage, in front of the very community they'd tried to use as their cover. "Who sent you?" Calvin asked, his voice still terrifyingly calm. They said nothing, trembling now. The man with the flat top leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "See? Here's the thing," he said. "We were just about to have some burgers, talk about old times, and you've upset our host." He gestured to the American flag still flying proudly. "You disrespected that, and you threatened our brother, in his own home, the home he fought for, that we all fought for." He let that hang in the air for a long, painful moment. "So here's your new 48-hour plan. You have 48 seconds to tell us exactly who you are, who put you up to this, and why, or..." He looked around at his 5 friends, then back at the 2 shaking men. "We're going to have a much, much longer conversation about the meaning of the word nuisance." The dam broke. It wasn't a trickle of information. It was a flood. The 2 men, tripping over each other's words, confessed everything. They weren't HOA. They were hired muscle from a shady real estate investment group that had been aggressively trying to buy up properties on the street. Calvin was a holdout. He loved his home and had refused every offer, every pressure tactic. So they decided to try and scare him out. They'd done it before in other neighborhoods, preying on the elderly and the vulnerable. They never expected this. As they spilled their guts, the actual sound of a real police siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. A neighbor, seeing the confrontation, had called 911, reporting men with guns causing a disturbance. 2 real police officers arrived, stepping out of their cruiser with cautious professionalism. They took in the scene. 2 terrified men in fake tactical vests, surrounded by 6 supremely calm, hyper-competent-looking individuals, and a gathered crowd of neighbors all pointing and talking at once. The lead officer listened as Calvin, calm and collected, explained the situation. He handed over the fake paperwork. The neighbors came forward, eagerly showing their phone videos, clear evidence of the confession, the intimidation, the entire scam. The look on the 2 imposters' faces was one of pure, undiluted humiliation. Their shoulders slumped. They weren't tough guys anymore. They were just criminals, caught on camera, being cuffed with real steel handcuffs by real police officers in front of everyone. The pathetic reality of their situation was exposed for the whole world to see. As they were being read their rights and led to the squad car, the man with the flat top called out, his voice booming with mock sincerity. "Hey, fellas, don't worry about your ride. I'm sure the real HOA where you reheaded has a great public transportation system." The neighborhood, a community that Calvin now realized had been watching his back all along, erupted in applause. Not for the revenge, but for the justice. Calvin looked at his 6 friends. No words were needed. The tension that had coiled in his stomach for the last hour finally released. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt validated. He felt protected. He was home. Sometimes the universe delivers justice with a whisper, and sometimes it rolls up in a diesel truck with 6 of its closest friends. That investment group was investigated, the scam unraveled, and Calvin, well, he still lives in his home. And that American flag flies a little higher now. A permanent, authorized structure. If you felt that chill of satisfaction when those bullies got exactly what they deserved, then you're in the right place. Smash that like button. It really helps us out. Tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying right place, right time revenge story you've ever heard? And of course, subscribe for more tales of karma coming back around when it's least expected, but most deserved.